We're answering your questions today, and the very first question is, should I upload my podcast onto YouTube? Great question. We get it all the time, and there are 3 things that you need to consider. Let's get started. It's the Video Marketing School. Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Owen Video, and podcasting and YouTube are very different beasts. The audience base is completely different. One is a passive listening platform. Another one is an active viewing platform. And so the very personality styles of the YouTube viewer and the podcast listener are very, very different. And so when you're asking, can I put my podcast on YouTube? I think what you're really saying is, can I quickly, cheaply, let's be honest, you're not trying to spend a bunch of money on this, right? Put my podcast on YouTube. And the answer to that is no. You cannot just take your podcast and schlep it on YouTube unless you're following a 3-part strategy. And I want to walk you through that strategy right now because it's going to answer all of your questions about this topic. So the first part of that strategy is the repository strategy. If your goal, with your podcast is to just have a repository, a place where you have your episodes, where they're online, they're easily findable, they're easily linkable, and you can embed them into your blog and you can do all those things. If that's your goal, then yes, you can upload your stuff to YouTube. But here's what I would do. I would create a channel that's designed just for your podcast. I would not have like the Owen Video channel where we upload like Owen Video's videos and his podcast and all that kind of stuff. Because you got a 60-minute podcast, the watch time that you'll get on YouTube will kill the rest of that channel. Because at the end of the day, very few people are going to watch that video podcast thing all the way to the end. But if you need the repository, it's there. Just don't expect your YouTube channel to grow, right? Don't expect to get tons of subscribers from this because it's just not going to happen that way. Now, the second part of the 3-part strategy is my favorite, and that's repurposing, okay? Repurposing is your money spot. When you think about, I want to upload my podcast to YouTube so that my YouTube channel grows and I get subscribers, this is really what you're talking about here. So the repurposing strategy is this. You take parts of your podcast and you put them onto YouTube in a YouTube-y way. And this goes back to like a foundational principle that I need you guys to be aware of, and it's called the P3 content strategy. P3 stands for platform, people, purpose, okay? And whenever you create content for the web, you need to think of what platform this is designed for. Podcast, YouTube, Facebook ads. What is this content really designed for? You have platform, but then you also have people. Who are the demographic? What's the demographic that you're trying to reach? Males, females, business owners? Who are you really trying to reach? And then, of course, the purpose of the video. What's your goal? Do you want them to click a link, watch another episode, binge watch? You got to think about all those things as you're making your content. And when you are repurposing, here's what you can do. You can think about your podcast. I'm making this podcast for iTunes, for Spotify, for passive listeners, right? They're going to listen for 45 minutes, an hour-ish, right? And so you make your podcast for them. But while you're doing that podcast, you're making notes. You're taking these mental notes and you're like, oh, this is a really good section. The best section of this podcast, I'm gonna pull out and put it on YouTube. And what you could do is re-record your own intro, where you say, you get in front of your camera and you're like, hey, on this week's podcast, I answered this great question and I wanted to share that question with you. So let's go to the clip of the podcast. And then boom, you cut over to the podcast, which you've already recorded, and you use something like Restream or Zoom to record it. And now what you've done is you've repurposed that podcast that was designed for listeners into a video that was made for watchers. When you're thinking about, I want to be successful on YouTube, that's a good way to go with your podcast. But I don't want to leave out tip number 3. I don't want you to sleep on this 3rd strategy, okay? And that's live streaming your podcast so that there is live video content where a live audience can watch you, listen to you going through your podcast. And then when you're done with that live stream, you unlist the video, right? It doesn't have to sit there and eat up at your channel, right? So what you do is you go and you get a free account over at epiclivevideo.com. And what you start doing is, rather than inviting your guests to Zoom or wherever else you're using, you invite your guests to join you in Restream. You broadcast live the podcast and you tell everybody, hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. We're gonna start recording in 5 minutes here, so ask your questions if you got questions, because we're not gonna talk to you much once we get started. You record your podcast, and then at the end, you engage with your audience a little bit, right? This is a phenomenal way to gain a live audience while you're doing your podcast, turning those live viewers into subscribers, which brings them back to your channel for more content. But here's the thing, remember, you don't wanna have this, 1.5 hour live stream just kind of hanging out on your channel. So after you're done with the podcast recording, because it's gonna be 2 weeks before that hits iTunes, right? And you don't want to ruin the surprise. You don't want people to watch it on live and then not listen to it. So what you do is you unlist the video. Unlist the video on YouTube. You still got the subscribers. You still got the watch time. You still got the audience. But now the content's gated and they got to listen to the podcast if they want to hear it again. So look, you want to put your podcast on YouTube? I agree with you. You're a podcaster. You should be on YouTube. But if you do it the wrong way, you're going to waste all of your time and you're going to waste some of your resources if you're hiring a VA. So if you're going to make that move, make it the right way and work with the Video Marketing School. We can help you with more of your strategy. Watch this video next. I'm Owen, and I'll see you next time.